So let's talk about particles, pyrotechnics, and policy, because pyrotechnics, that's fireworks, give rise to particles, and this has very important implications for policy. For example, when Hong Kong created Disneyland, it had evening fireworks, and there was great worry that those fireworks would deposit metals in the nearby coastal waters. So fireworks create a number of problems. Not all of them are related to particles. We just talked about the toxic metal impact. But of course, fireworks cause injury. They affect visibility, so sometimes there are road accidents because of the smoke. The fireworks expose workers the technicians who let the fireworks off, they're exposed to the metals. And there are perchlorates from fireworks that end up in lakes. And of course, there are health effects possibly from the particles that fireworks generate. And sometimes there's just even a problem of firework waste. It sort of looks like red snow. And you see here a typical example. And then my favorite picture of a happy young boy cleaning away the firework waste after Chinese Spring Festival. This waste was so worrying to Nanjing that they decided this was a good reason to ban fireworks. So over the years, they gradually reduced the amount of firework waste at Chinese New Year by eliminating the fireworks. The effect of this wasn't only to eliminate fireworks, and we see here this enormous peak of particles in the atmosphere declining from 2013, 2014, and by 2015 there's virtually no peak of the particles on the eve of the first day of the new year. So that's very impressive, but that was not because they wanted to eliminate the particles, they simply wanted to get rid of the waste. So that was an unintended benefit. Of course, this didn't happen all over China. And here what you see is, for the Chinese New Year of 2015, you see a range of different behaviors. So you see in the northern parts of China, you see fireworks are giving very large peaks in terms of the amount of particles. But if you look to southern China or to Hong Kong or to Taiwan, you find very little activity. There's virtually no peak in the particles at the Chinese New Year. So what are these places doing that don't have fireworks particles? Are they not celebrating New Year? Well, of course they're celebrating New Year. So sometimes it's simply a public display. Hong Kong, for example, in the evening celebrates the city's sort of wonderful harbour with a display of searchlights and lasers. So you can celebrate without using fireworks. And sometimes, of course, in Taiwan, you can celebrate with lanterns. And none of these create very many particles. But of course, the real problem is the enthusiasm for fireworks in some parts of China. So Beijing loves the firework tradition, and it's been very difficult for Beijing to stop the use of fireworks and then eliminate the particles that they create. However, China has been improving its air quality, and there's been a 30% decline in the pollutants over the years since 2013. And Beijing is no exception. You see here a gradual improvement in the concentration of particles in the atmosphere over these years. What about Spring Festival? What happens at Spring Festival? Do they still celebrate the Spring Festival with fireworks and produce lots of particles? Well, it's difficult to say. You see here a long series of measurements from the US Embassy in Beijing, and then you see the typical average of Beijing on the eve of Chinese New Year, and it's hard to sort of say what's happening here. It's rather complicated. Maybe in the last 3 or 4 years there's been a decrease in the average pollution in Beijing. But if we look carefully, we can see something else happening. So in 2011, what we notice is that the pollution is very low. And this year, the air was well mixed. There was no inversion holding the pollutants close to the ground. But if we go forward slightly to 2012, what we find is a strong inversion this year, which made the pollution concentrations very high. So the particle concentrations were high. So let's move forward now and look at 2016. So in 2016, strong inversion and very high fireworks particles in the air of Beijing. So what's happened by 2019? Well, in 2019, there was also a strong inversion. So actually, 2019 should have had lots of particles in the air also, but it didn't. What had happened? Well, perhaps Beijing is gradually solving the problem and not releasing so many fireworks particles. So let's look at the data. Well, the data suggests, firstly, that the concentration of particles in the air is actually higher beyond the Fifth Ring Road than it is inside the Fifth Ring Road. So somehow the fireworks particle problem is related to the rural areas around Beijing, not to the central parts of Beijing. So what's causing this? Well, there's been a very steep decline in sales. So sales have declined enormously since 2011, so perhaps less fireworks are being sold. But this is a bit unusual because the decline is very, very steep, much steeper than the improvement in the air pollution. So what might be happening here? Well, that's the official figures. The illegal fireworks seem to have maintained a fairly constant value through to about 2017. So there are illegal fireworks being sold in Beijing, and maybe that accounts for some of the pollution still in the air. And certainly if we look where the sales are taking place, it's clear that people travel to the outskirts of Beijing, beyond the Fifth Ring Road, to buy their fireworks, often from temporary or illegal shops. So the fireworks are not declining as much as they should, and so therefore the particles may not be declining as much as they should. So if we can look at what people are saying in Beijing, from their posts to Weibo and things like that, we can see that in the last few years, support for fireworks has gradually decreased. While that support has decreased, there are more official notices about a ban on fireworks and increased concerns about safety and security of fireworks. These are all official posts, so the government is trying to communicate these bans with the people. Also, we can note that illegal fireworks have increased over the last few years. So while there's been an attempt to stop the legal sales, illegal sales have increased. But also at the same time, the promotion of control has declined because the government thinks, well, we're pretty much in control now and we've controlled the firework problem, even though there's this small increase in illegal activities. If we look carefully, people in Beijing are beginning to accept the ban. We can see on the right a poster which suggests you shouldn't use fireworks within the Fifth Ring Road. And even quite traditional elderly people are beginning to accept the ban. We can see here a man has said, in past years, my father would buy lots of fireworks, but this year we've persuaded him to buy less. And he's actually quite happy because he realizes there's been poor air quality, the policy is now restrictive, and he's happy now to have a greener festival at Chinese New Year. This policy, while successful in reducing much of the firework emissions, has unintended consequences. For example, fireworks are sold in much lower quantities. So this means the provinces of China that produce the fireworks, Jiangxi and Hunan province, their large factories have closed. That means that the production of smaller quantities of fireworks has moved to smaller factories. The smaller factories have more accidents. Additional pressures come from the trade war with the United States, has further decreased the need for fireworks. So these are the kind of unintended consequences of a policy aimed at producing less emissions and lower particles in the atmosphere of Chinese cities. So this is success. In a sense, the top-down approach, the government saying we must restrict fireworks, have led to reductions. The authorities in China have engaged with the public in social media very successfully. They've convinced them to shift their attitudes, and that's been very effective. However, this might not be effective in all countries, because not all countries have such centralized administrations. And of course, as we've seen, there are economic implications. What this means is that India has not been as successful. India, we find less improvement to their emissions when they celebrate Diwali, and illegal sales have been very difficult to control in India. So what are the policy implications of this? Of course, when Beijing celebrated 70 years, it celebrated them with a public display rather than allowing people to use private fireworks. So this meant that there was much less pollution. It's very impressive to see this. And I was 70 years old, so I thought at first, wow, Beijing is celebrating my 70th birthday. But no, it was the 70th birthday of the People's Republic.